ELENIN is listed by JPL as a hyperbolic comet.
What does that mean?
It means it's never been here before and never will be here again.
It's gone.
It's gone. It's a one-of. You know, it's a one-of-a-kind. In fact, what's so bizarre, if you start doing some study of astronomy, in the entire history of astronomy, George, there has never been a hyperbolic comet recorded and verified by all of astronomy. Ever.
Now, how do they know it's not going to come around in 200 years?
Well, but remember, they can calculate the orbit based on positional plots using, Kepler's laws, Newton's laws, gravity. We know what's up beyond the inner solar system. We know that it doesn't go anywhere near close to the other stars. So the orbit is pretty well defined, particularly after it comes through. We'll know exactly when, if it ever comes back again, it's going to come back again. And it turns out that number is around 11,800 years. But coming in, JPL, NASA has been insisting from day one, this is a hyperbolic comet, meaning it's an interstellar visitor with an inclination to the orbit of the Earth of 1.84 degrees. So I look at that and I say, what are the odds that a random interstellar visitor, never seen before in the history of astronomy, which goes back hundreds of years, right?
Right.
Will have that specific inclination. And I do a simple calculation. There are 360 degrees in a circle, right?
Yep.
You simply divide 360 by 1.84. Now, if you could follow along at home, folks, with your calculator, and George, if you had a calculator there in the studio, you'd now be falling on the floor because the number that the calculator will spit out,
it's not big enough.
195. You have one chance in 195 of that coming up by chance. You multiply that by the 200 plus million I just gave you for the previous odds, we're now up to one chance in 45 billion, with a B, that this thing is accidental. In other words, all of these orbital parameters, the numbers, not me, the numbers say, with a statistical, certitude, you could take to Vegas and own the world if this was on your side, that 45 billion to 1, this thing has been designed. The orbit is not random. The orbit is as precise as NASA sending the Cassini spacecraft to Saturn.
Are you saying it's a craft of some type?
It is something. This is where I was several weeks ago. It's something which was sent to us with these specific parameters. Remember, if I go outside, George, in the winter, and you can't do that in Southern California, but in New England you can, and I roll up some snow and I throw it at somebody else, that is a specifically designed trajectory.
Right.
A fastball in Fenway Park is a specifically designed trajectory. The ball is manufactured. The snowball is just natural stuff. But the trajectory, the orbit, has been defined by an artificial intelligence, i.e. a human being.
Sent this way.
Sent this way. So whether ELENIN, remember we're talking where I was weeks ago in my thinking, was natural or artificial, meaning it was just a comet, or it was a spacecraft, was irrelevant, because the numbers prove someone sent it.
Now, why?
Now we get to the weird dichotomy, which ELENIN himself will not address, really. He's papering it over on his website. He pretends it doesn't exist.
Nor will NASA address this.
NASA, remember, ELENIN discovered the thing, so he's been calculating its orbit separately from NASA. They're both using the same database. In other words, all over the world, there are astronomers, both amateurs and professional, who've been observing this thing night after night after night for the last 8 months, right, taking pictures.
Sure.
They feed them into this central clearinghouse, this database up at Harvard, the IAU Center. NASA takes those observations and calculates, using its computers, an orbit. ELENIN in Moscow, with his little laptop sitting out in the parking lot, he did a really cute interview with Russian television. I mean, he's a really nice guy, just a 30-year-old guy who's tickled to death. He's discovered a comet, and he hasn't a guile in the world. He's not in on a plot. He's not part of some super conspiracy. He's just really feeling cool. He's discovered a comet.
Yeah, he just found it.
that something much bigger is apparently going on. He calculates that this orbit of this thing, when he first found it, was not forever, meaning hyperbolic, it was 13,000 years. Meaning, that's half the precessional cycle of 26,000, right?
That's right.
13,000 years is the last time of Atlantis. It's the last time of the fourth world of the Hopi, of the great transition 13 Baktuns ago of the Mayan calendar. It's the time of Zep Tepi and the ancient Egyptians. It's the last time human beings had really high-tech, cool stuff on this planet in the model until something very bad happened and we lost it all. We lost almost all those people, and we've been climbing back up the ladder to try to reach for the stars again after 13,000 years. Well, what are the odds, you're going to get tired of me saying this, that this thing, with all these other parameters, could be exactly 13,000 years from the last catastrophe of the Earth?
1 in a zillion?
It's so big that there probably isn't a computer on the planet that could handle it, George. That's why I can say categorically tonight to everybody hanging, I hope, on the edge of their chair, looking at their radios like we used to do when I drove home with my parents from the supermarket.
Gathered around with your family.
Yeah. It is artificial. ELENIN is artificial, regardless of whether it's a rock, a comet, or a spaceship.
That it was sent this way.
By an intelligence. Now, my model, which I've discussed on the show before, it is us who sent it. It's our great-great-great-great-great-grandmothers, the folks who survived that last catastrophe, that last huge Atlantean descent into the primeval sea of nothing and oblivion when something awful happened, and they sent to their future descendants a time capsule or an ark or a library or something that would help us now in our time of greatest need as the physics is conspiring to maybe, big maybe, create the circumstances that will do that same thing to the Earth again. I see too much incredible numerical precision into an incredibly uplifting message. George, what would you say would be the one thing that would free the human race forever from anyone trying to put us into chains? It would be the ultimate understanding of how the universe works, how to create free energy, anti-gravity, immortality. It would free us from elites and banksters and everybody who's picking our pocket and all the corruption we see going on now, once and forever, provided that message and that information got to the ordinary folks. It would be a stunning way to change history, and that's what my friend Arthur C. Clarke, I think, was trying to tell us in several of his stunning classics, not the least of which is Childhood's End. Remember how that book went?
That's a classic.
Incredible. Now, there's one other data point we have to hit before we go to calls.
All right.
I know we're running late on time, but if I don't do this, I'm going to kick myself in the morning. I sent you a couple of photographs a few days ago.
Richard, it is the morning.
And what did you see on the photos?
I saw a little tetrahedron.
Exactly. On the official NASA Stereo B footage of the interaction a few days ago.
It looked like a floating pyramid.
It was the night that you and I were supposed to be in the studio here in Albuquerque. That night, Stereo B, which is one of these NASA solar spacecraft, took a sequence of video frames across millions of miles from Earth's orbit to about the orbit of Venus. That's the distance that ELENIN was from the spacecraft that night, 23 million miles. And it photographed ELENIN interacting with the solar wind, this spray of charged particles that's constantly blowing off the sun. And because of this ghostly impingement of this radiation in space around ELENIN, suddenly a shape showed up, a geometric figure. ELENIN appears to have a tetrahedrally shaped geometric, I can only call it a force field, which is interacting with the solar wind, with hydrogen and free protons and electrons that basically recombine to cause it to light up, kind of like glowing when it hits this screen. That shape, that geometry, is incredibly recursive of the geometry embodied in the trajectory. All those 19.5 numbers are now embodied in the shape of the field around this thing itself, meaning it's not just a Bergy bit. It cannot just be a comet. It has to be an actual ship with generators and computers and control, meaning it could do anything from here on. The dates to watch will be when it passes around the sun on the 11th, 9/11, when it is in conjunction with the Earth, which is on September 26th.
November, they will tell the astronauts, come home.
Well, what's interesting that happens in November, and I find the coincidence, again, more coincidence, eerie. On November 11th, 11/11/11, ELENIN aligns with the Earth, with Mercury, and Venus, all in an absolutely straight line within tenths of a degree. A couple, 3 days later, around the 23rd, I think, it aligns with Earth and the Sun. If there is a hyperdimensional generator on board this thing, if that's what's creating this weird geometry in the solar wind CME stream that we're seeing, then those alignment dates could in fact be very interesting and important in the physics, and there may be reasons in the ritual, some of these guys are obvious ritualists, why they would want to bring folks down and have them here on Earth and not in the space station when those key dates come, and who knows what might happen. I have, remember that line in Star Wars where Luke says, I have a bad feeling about this? I don't have a fuzzy, warm feeling about abandoning something that's taken us 10 years and $100 billion to build just because of some damn pump in a booster in a rocket that has worked incredibly well hundreds of times. Earlier, we're looking at scenarios. I don't necessarily believe any of these individual possibilities, but I'm laying them out there so people can pick and choose. Something is going to happen. One of these sets of probabilities is going to take place. The numbers say this thing has been designed, sent to us, obviously for some reason. We don't know for certainty what the reason is yet. Hopefully by the end of November, when these last alignments take place, we will know a lot more than we do now.
It's going to be catastrophic. Richard says no.
It doesn't come anywhere closer than 22 million miles. How can you have a catastrophe when something is as far away as Venus?
That is far away indeed.